Well, thanks for staying with us. It's still the conversations right here on News Central Television. I am Chiwete Onyema. We now place our focus to South Africa's African National Congress, as it's, of course, at an inflection point. Born from the struggle against apartheid and crowned by Nelson Mandela's 1994 victory, the ANC dominated national politics for 3 decades until 2024, when it lost its parliamentary majority for the first time and entered a coalition. Now, ahead of municipal elections, President Cyril Ramaphosa is pushing a 6-point renewal plan targeting unemployment above 30%, entrenched corruption, deep inequality, and crime that claims more than 60 lives a day. Now, the party's challenge is as much local as national. Service delivery failures have hurt the ANC more in municipal polls, where daily frustrations meet the ballot box. Now, supporters argue that the movement can be rebuilt. Critics question whether the renewal is genuine or merely rhetorical. Can Ramaphosa's reform turn the tide in local elections and restore trust where it matters most? On the streets, in homes, and at the ward level? To unpack this, I'm now joined by Professor Breakfast Ntsikelello. He's a political analyst. And of course, I'm joined by Ghaleb, Cachalia, former Shadow Minister of Public Enterprise. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm going to start with you, Professor Breakfast. How did the ANC's Liberation Legacy and 1994 mandate shape expectations for governance, and how has that social contract eroded over 30 years?
Yeah, so the political lifespan or the political longevity of liberation movements, it tends to be affected by institutionalization of corruption. So I think since 1994 until arguably 2024, the ANC did not demonstrate a good track record in government in terms of getting the job done, in terms of promoting development for the majority. I am not arguing that there have been no changes that have happened. There have been. If you look at the growth of the black middle class, if you look at power that is provided to the majority of black people and so on. But I think the ANC could have done better instead of the romanticism of the past or the glorification of history or the preservation of tradition. So I think that too much historicity without promoting development has caught up with the ANC. But also the ANC failed to realize that if you look at the majority of eligible voters at the moment, it's young people, and young people on the continent, I'm sure you will concur with me, they're becoming impatient with the older generation that is falling short of getting the job done. So I think that social contract has been eroded by the failures of the ANC. That's why the president, in his speech, there was a great deal of emphasis on the role of local government regarding the upcoming elections, because that is a do or die for the ANC, because it's either the ANC will go one level up or one level down. But I think it will be the biggest loser across the political spectrum.
Let me come to you now, Cachalia, right? Now, when we look at situations of things, now what structural shifts would you say led from 57.5% in 2019 to 40% in 2024? Now, this is the first majority loss since democracy, and tell us, what does that say about voter realignment?
Look, this is a trajectory which is not new across post-liberation countries on the continent of Africa and elsewhere in the globe. The point is, yes, the ANC did have a mammoth task when it got voted into power, as it were, and there was uneven development, as the professor says. But the development of patronage networks have been a very serious problem. And those patronage networks, which have delivered not only unevenly, but extremely narrowly have resulted in a great deal of dissatisfaction. I mean, you can even compare it to Nigeria, if you like. In some ways, you know, the PDP in Nigeria, like the PDP in Nigeria, the ANC risks becoming a party that confuses electoral dominance with entitlement rather than performance. Now, it's all very well for President Ramaphosa to stand up at the 11th hour in a very reactive manner to say we need to focus on performance. But the question is, how do you do it, and is it possible? I don't know whether voters are that forgiving, because they need, like everybody else, they want the basics delivered. And the delivery of basics is ultimately held up, particularly at municipal level, by these patronage networks and massive corruption that is set in. Whether you can turn that back without losing power in and of itself for the ANC is a question which is open-ended, and I don't know whether that can particularly happen.
All right, let me come back to you, Professor Ntsikelello now. Why does the ANC historically, underperform in local elections when you compare it to national contests? And how do service delivery protests translate into votes?
Yeah, I want to build upon the point or the argument that is advanced by my colleague. It's a very important point, but I frame it differently, though the main line of argument is the same. The employment of social and political capital in pursuit of personal accumulation in order to amass wealth for purposes of upward social mobility. The ANC has been using, I'm trying to answer a question, they've been using the state machinery to dish out favors to their henchmen in exchange for political support, in particular at local government level, whereby people are not appointed on merit, whereby local government is being used as a center of accumulation to amass wealth. So that has put the ANC on the back foot. With regard to the issue of violent service delivery protest, obviously they are caused by the structure of the economy, but also they are caused by social and political discontentment, given the fact that people are not getting the services that they need. And because of that, they take to the street in opposition to lack of service delivery.
Let me come back to you, Mr. Cachalia, now. I'd like to know which core municipal failures, be it water, be it electricity, waste and housing, which of them most strongly correlates with the ANC vote declines at the ward level?
All of what you mentioned are competing for top place. They're all up there. Our water situation is dire. Our electricity situation has become better in the short term, but its long-term longevity has not been particularly explained or addressed. How it's going to proceed and how we are going to proceed in a world which doesn't necessarily want to fund fossil fuels and coal. These are questions which have not been answered. Mercifully, we've had a bit of a break in that regard, and we must give kudos to the ANC and to the minister responsible for doing that. But in parallel, everything else is collapsing, and as I say, you can stand on the hilltops and say, yes, we have a liberation legacy. But, you've milked this liberation legacy. The liberation legacy may well be the ANC's greatest asset, but it's also a perception which has been spent. And they have spent this. And they have spent this as via these corruptive mechanisms, and people are now extremely upset. This will translate into votes being lost in a way I will predict that we have begun to see in the last national elections, but are going to be much more acute in these local elections, because this is what affects people in their everyday lives.
Let me come back to you. Let me butt in here, sorry, but let me just move over now to Professor Ntsikelello. Now, how has corruption scandals and deployment practices affected institutional capacity, and what measurable reforms would signal real change?
Look, if you look at the public sector, I mean, the public sector arguably has been transformed. I know this is very controversial, but if you look at the quality of the public sector that the country has, it's very questionable, because people by and large have, and I'm not saying that because the public sector, look, it's an open secret, is black, therefore it is corrupt or it is incompetent. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that some of the appointments on a large scale have been made on non-merit basis, right, to push this ANC agenda in terms of procurement, in terms of tendering system, privatization of services, and so. I mean, we've had many scandals. For instance, even now, there is a commission which is underway to uncover the truth about the capturing of the security architecture, right? There are allegations of corruption within the security apparatus. Even in the judiciary, there have been scandals like state capture, whereby the family of Guptas had too much grip over the executive institution. There were findings, there were recommendations regarding the political reforms which are needed because the executive was found wanting. But those things, they were not responded to. The findings are basically gathering dust. The ANC has refused to respond to those findings in terms of the reforms which were put forward by former Judge Zondo, the former Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court, in terms of what is needed. Right, in terms of the professionalization of the public sector.
Let me come to you now, Mr. Cachalia. With more than 60 murders per day, how does crime undermine public confidence and governance? And can local policing reforms actually shift voter sentiment?
Crime is a massive problem in this country. It is. We have learned to live with it in the way that the idiom about the frog being placed in the water slowly boils. We live with this, and we've become almost inured by it. But it affects people's lives in every single way, from petty corruption in crime to gender-based violence, which is out of control in this country, to all sorts of aspects of crime, including murder, where we rank up there in the world, if not the highest. It is chronic. It is extremely difficult. Now, the ANC, says we want to reform, and they've put down a program of reform, 6 points of reform. One of the key points of reform points at the issue of crime. Of course, it needs addressing. But the point is, can this be done? Can this reform be pushed through? We've heard these words before. The ANC actually is in many ways is fighting against itself rather than against the opposition. The opposition will win as a result of arithmetic, but the ANC is shooting itself in the foot because it is unable. Its hands are tied. It cannot extricate itself from this legacy of patronage, which has fueled all this madness which we sit with. Coalition politics will emerge to be the key. It will happen in the local elections as it happened at the national elections, and in 2029, it will be a major factor.
All right, thank you so much, gentlemen, for having this conversation with us. I've been talking to political analyst Professor of Breakfast Ntsikelello, and also I've been talking to Ghaleb Cachalia, who's a former Shadow Minister of Public Enterprise. Thank you, gentlemen, once again.